All right, we're recording, and I just wanted to welcome everybody to today's webinar. It's Thursday, 17th of September, 2015, and today we're going to talk about tarping and securing loads. Put a lot of research into some of this stuff. It's kind of going to be a little bit lengthy, so we'll kind of speed through it a little bit just so we can get through everything. There'll be a lot of probably some questions. So if you do have any questions, please just shoot me an email and we'll kind of work through those, site-specific type directions. If you need help with anything, please, ask. All right, tarping and securing loads. Once again, my name is John Zeman, TPM Safety Specialist. And we're going to go through these slides today and hopefully enlighten you on a little bit of some of the basics. Then we're going to dig into some of the regulations, talk about some of the federal regulations, talk about some state regulations, look at general safety, and then look at kind of the nuts and bolts of tying down loads and some ideas on tarping. Basically, proper securement of loads prevents damage to our property and harming our people and downtime. Time is money, and how do we get our products to market? Different things like that is through trucking. So because it's such a dangerous activity, there's laws, regulations, and responsibilities that transporting goods requires. So when you load your cargo and you do different things like that, there's a lot of little details that you got to look forward to because you're obligated to do some of the safety techniques that involved with having a very secure load, and that means a very safe load. Okay. One of the biggest problems that we run into is people falling off of loads. Improper, inadequate securement can cause cargo to shift, slide, tip, or even fall off the vehicle. So that can cause huge problems for the motorists that may be following the truck. All cargo must be properly distributed and adequately secured. So that goes for if you have a box type trailer or if you have a flatbed trailer. There's just, depending on specifically what you're doing with your load, you need to secure it properly. Inspect the vehicle's cargo and load securing devices within the first 50 miles. So after you get it all secured, you need to go back and revisit that load because things shift, things kind of balance out, things kind of move where they want to go, and then you got to recheck the loads. And a good rule of thumb is about 50 miles. Can jiggle stuff loose, so you want to go back and tie it down. And also after 3 hours, 150 miles, or duty status. So you kind of constantly, once you set in the yard and you fill it with lumber and you tie it all down, you're not done. You need to periodically, as you transport that load, to check it for, any time it could loosen up. It could cause an accident. Now, these are the federal laws on this. It says basically all tie-downs, cargo securement systems, parts, and components used to secure cargo must be in proper working order when used to perform that function with no damage or weakened components, such as, but not limited to, cracks or cuts that will adversely affect the performance of cargo securement purposes, and including or reducing working load limit. So our tie downs have a specific, they're engineered to hold down a certain amount of cargo, and there's a safety factor built in, but as they leave, the store where you get them, and then you use them, they degrade over time. So this law here actually, makes us have to maintain those tie downs. Now, vehicle structures, floors, walls, decks, tie down anchor points, headboards, bulkheads, stakes, posts, associated mounting pockets used to contain or secure articles of cargo must also be strong enough to meet the cargo, and that's in another law, the actual details of that. So there's a lot of laws that have been, they did engineering feedback to figure out, well, what do we need to safely secure loads? What are the details? What's the minimum securement practice that we need to ensure truckers use so that the loads stay on the truck? Now, 104 says material used as dunnage bags, chocks, cradles, bars, or used blocking or bracing must not have damage or defects which could compromise the effectiveness of the securement system. So everything you use needs to be inspected every time you use it for any kind of defects. And if it's, out of compliance with that, you need to, replace them. Tie downs and other attachment or fastening devices used to secure articles of cargo must conform to the standards. And there's a whole list of standards that goes through, depending specifically on what you're using, there's a standard that exactly, tells you the engineering on what you have to have. So, some of the other, blocking, bracing, dunnage, different tie downs. So there's, depending on the specific products that we're moving, there's specific tie downs that should be used that will safely secure those loads. One of the big pushes, this is out of Washington, the DOSH or, the L&I we're pushing is people to switch from the levers to the ratchets. It says with a load lever binder, you exert so much force. And, there's been this big push with ergonomics, and that's kind of what this is involving. With the levers, you have to use so much force to lock those down. So, you can damage your shoulders or backs, or when it does go, it'll throw your body. So you can get injured. So what they recommend is to switch out. If you guys, have ratchets, great. If not, try to move toward using ratchets. Phase out the, the levers into the ratchets. Because ratchets don't take much force at all. You just ratchet it. So some of the precautions to look at when you're securing your loads, pay attention to the details that can happen, slipping and falling, and how do you securing your body? You're so worried about securing the load, well, secure your body. Falls from the same level account for 8% of all trucking injuries. Falls from the same level means you're on the ground and you fall down. And that has to do with, like those levers. If you're pulling it and all of a sudden it gives way, it'll throw you down. So inspect and replace worn straps and chains, because if those break, they'll throw you too. Or they'll come back and hit you, or the whole load will come down. Inspect and replace cargo bars, worn pads, damaged locking mechanisms. And we talked about upgrading to the ratchets, and maintain solid footing. We get in a hurry sometimes, but always, be mindful of what if this gives way, where's my body gonna go? So keep that solid base on your footing. Some other things, your header boards, you make sure you always push your loads all the way up flush with the header boards. It stops them from moving north or toward the cab. And then some of the other devices we'll go over more in depth with tarps and sealed container loads. We won't hit up much on those just because a lot of our members here don't use so much containers. But now we talk about weight. All vehicles must stay within legal weight limits. Overloading can affect steering, braking, and speed control. So that's why there's all these rules, is that affects the trailer. You get a lot of the physics involved when you're moving down the road at different speeds. So from federal, we'll talk about federal stuff just so that we can kind of hit everybody's area. Some states may have a little tighter rules, but basically if you're on the interstates, we'll go off of some of that because that's more general. But so single axle 20,000, tandem axle 34, gross weight 80,000 pounds. Just kind of depends on what roads you're on, and you have to coordinate sometimes with, depending on your load, especially height and all that, with the state DOTs. So like if there's certain bridges or exit ramps, different things like that, that you need to make sure you survey the whole trip so that the path you're taking is a safe one. So federally, we'll talk about these. No federal length limits. Trailer length, there's no limits on those. And then vehicle width, it talks about on the national network, that's your interstate systems. But it says no state may impose a width limit of more or less than 102 inches. Safety devices necessary for safe and efficient operating of motor vehicles may not be included in the calculation of width. So like your mirrors, vehicle height, no federal vehicle height is imposed, but we have bridges and we have overpasses, stuff like that. So we need to kind of be mindful of that. So if you do have something super high, you need to make sure that you'll get through all the bridges on your route. In my previous life, I used to work for South Dakota DOT, and I sat right next to one of the highway engineers, and that's what he did all day. Is he'd get calls from trucking companies, asking them about routes. What's the height of this bridge? What's the height of that bridge? And so that they could plan out the whole route, so you can get the load there. So that's kind of what you have to do. Now, height and center of gravity loads can cause trucks to tip over. So you always want to put the heavy stuff on the bottom and the lighter stuff on the top. Keep the center of gravity low. Too much weight on the steering axle and shifting weight too far to the rear of the vehicle, can cause imbalance in the trailers. And then too little weight on driving axles. So they just spin out, right? Some more regulations. These are kind of the main ones from Federal Motor Carrier these are the laws that govern our process of loads and cargo securement. Number one, the rules, cover trucks, tractors, trailers, and basically what we all need to be mindful of, each commercial motor vehicle must, when transporting cargo on public roads, be loaded and equipped with the cargo secured in accordance with the subpart to prevent the cargo from leaking, spilling, blowing, or falling from the motor vehicle. So it's a very, very general statement. So basically, you need to have the load secured. Well, how do you do that? Well, then you need to know that. If you're the one moving that product, the burden of proof is on you to follow, this part B here. So if you have 10,000 pound item and it's this high, you need to know what kind of strapping you need to secure that load. They put it on you to understand that, and you got to be able to prove that if it's called into question, especially if you would have an accident. See there, it says preventing against shifting load. Cargo must be contained, immobilized, or secured in accordance with this subpart to prevent shifting upon or within the vehicle to such an extent that the vehicle's stability or maneuverability would be adversely affected. So they put it on you. You need to know how to handle your loads. And they give recommendations. I put some links in here. If you guys want some little more specifics on your specific industry or what you're hauling, we'll gladly furnish that for you. Now, here's where we get into lumber, building products. A lot of us, we move boards on flatbed trailers. So this is kind of what this says. The rules in this section apply to transportation of bundles of dressed lumber, packaged lumber, building products such as plywood, gypsum board, and other similar shaped items. Lumber or building products which are not bundled or packaged must be treated as loose items, and then that's covered by another regulation. For this purpose, section bundled refers to packages of lumber, building materials, such products which utilize for securement as single articles of cargo. So when you have a banded square piece, that has all your boards bundled and you have them wrapped, that's considered one piece, one article. Positioning of bundles. Bundles must be placed side by side in direct contact with each other, or a means must be prevented to prevent bundles from shifting toward each other. So as we put like our stacks of 2x4s that are bundled, we need to make sure those bundles are pushed together. Like if there's, you have them side by side, they need to be pushed together, or if they're not touching, they need to have blocking and stuff like that so that it stops any kind of movement on the actual flatbed after, when they're tied down. Now here's a few more regulations. I kind of wanted to hit on some of this regulation stuff just so you know what the laws are and all that. So securement of bundles, transport using no more than one tier. Bundles carried on one tier must be secured in accordance with the general provisions of another subpart, and I'll show you what that is. securement of bundles transported using more than one tier. So if you have, one bundle stacked atop another bundle, I mean, I've seen them 3 or 4 high in some instances. We'll kind of talk about exactly how those need to be secured. And then part 1 here says bundled against lateral movement by stakes on the sides of the vehicle and secured by tie downs laid out over the top tier as outlined in another provision. But I'll show you pictures. Restrained from lateral movement by blocking or high friction devices between tiers. They even make some claw decking. Some of you guys probably are familiar with that. But so basically, you need to have each bundle secured by each level. So we'll look into some pictures in a minute. So basically, you place directly on top of other bundles or spacers required in accordance with the following. The length of spacer between bundles must provide support to all pieces in the bottom row of the bundle, and the width of individual spacers must be equal to the greater than the height. Spacers are comprised of layers of material. The layers must be the same size fastened together in a manner which ensures the spacer performs a single piece of material. So basically you have one bundle and you have 2 bundles, you put them together tight and then you strap them down. So basically it makes one bundle out of 2 of them. That's kind of the science behind this. So you want your load to basically be, when you're done with it, have one piece and it's all hooked. The trailer and your load is one piece, and that's what you do by securing it. Here's some of the details on arrangement of tie downs. With a minimum of 2 tie downs for bundles longer than 5 feet. So if you have 5 feet or less bundle size, you can use 1 tie down. If they're larger than 5 feet, you need to use 2. So that kind of gives you an idea of, and we'll show pictures of this. If there are 3 tiers, the middle and top bundles must be secured by tie downs in accordance with regulation. And if there are 3 or more tiers, then one of the middle bundles and top bundles must be secured by tie down evidence in accordance with the general and other regulation. So what that tells you is you have to tie down every bundle. You can't leave loose bundles in between bundles. So we'll show pictures that will really help with this. So it kind of as a rule of thumb for what we do, you should use 2 types of tie downs for each bundle because most of them are over 5 feet. So when you look at a load or you're looking out a window and someone's loading or whatever, look at each bundle and look if there's 2 straps going over it. And that's kind of easy to recognize. If there's only 1 strap going over a long bundle that's over 5 feet, then it's not done right. The link here takes you right to the federal. They actually have a whole book on this stuff. It's put out by federal, DOT. So it has all the details of all the different circumstances. So, specifically you can look up what you need or you can ask me and I'll help you. All right, this is kind of when this is what we want to do. When you're loading or securing a load, we need to prevent movement of that load. So we need to provide securement from the load going forward or backward or side to side and also up. So that's kind of when you're tying something down, you got to make sure that it can't move. This is what we talked about, we want those 2 bundles to be pushed together so it kind of makes 1 bundle. So if you look at that, you have 2 that are separate. That's the wrong way with the red X there. And if you look at the check mark one there, they've been pushed together, so basically it's 1 bundle now. So we look at 2 tiers. I know a lot of it, we're moving lumber and stuff like that. We have multiple tiers on these trucks. So this is the details on that. So we want to place the bundles directly on top of other bundles or spacers, and then we secure the stack of bundles with tie downs. Tie down over the second tier of bundles, 6 feet above the trailer deck. Tie downs for other multiple tiers, not over 6 feet from the trailer. And tie downs over the top tier of bundles with a minimum of 2 tie downs over each bundle longer than 5 feet. So the same thing, you got to go 2 straps over anything larger than 5 feet. So that's kind of what this shows. So we have 3 tiers. See how you tied down the middle ones, get tied down, the top gets tied down. So you secure the bundles by tie downs over each tier of the bundles in accordance with the requirements, using at least 2 tie downs over each bundle on the top tier that's longer than 5 feet. So that this kind of will show you how that works. This is the correct example of how you do the bundles. So first layer has 2 tie downs over it, second layer has 2 tie downs over it, and third layer has 2 tie downs over it. And then so on and so forth. And see how they're stacked on top of each other directly? They're not bricked like a brick style where you brick it. No, it's you have it stacked directly on top of each other, and then each layer has 2 straps going over it. So this is the correct way that it should be doing. So there it is. And that's a link up there. There's actually, this is the whole driver's handbook, cargo securement. There's a whole book written on all the details of this by federal DOT. So let's talk about placement of wrappers. So this is for log trucks here. The front and rear wrappers need to be at least 10 feet apart. Logs not held in place by contact with other logs or stakes, bunks, or standards must be held in place by a tie down. Front and rear wrappers located within 6 feet of the stakes. On short logs, wrappers will be placed no less than 12 inches from the end of the log. Logs on the top or outside should be secured with at least 2 wrappers. So there's a picture of that. So you have the tie downs going on the shortest ones, and then that secures the ones that it's touching, so on through the whole load. Why? I mean, why do we, I mean, yeah, we got regulations and laws and they'll fine us if we don't do it right, but why? Why do we really want to know about securing loads? Why do we know about tarping our loads correctly? Well, let's dig into that. This is the reason why. Fatalities. If loads aren't done correctly, people die. So here's an example from the FACE program, Fatality Assessment and Control Evaluation. Whenever you have a fatality, NIOSH, one of the scientific side of OSHA or the federal government, does a report, and then they publish findings. So we're going to go through an example of one. So on January 11th, 94, 4-year-old male laborer was killed after falling 8 feet from a flatbed trailer. The incident occurred after a victim had loaded the trailer with pallets of bagged cement. He had climbed on top of the pallets to spread a tarp over them when he apparently slipped and fell to the ground. He suffered severe head injuries and died the next day in the hospital. So he was up on top of his load, spreading a tarp, and he slipped and fell. So let's look at what NIOSH, the engineers with the federal government, they think would prevent something like this. So investigators concluded that in order to prevent similar accidents in the future, these safety guidelines should be followed. Number 1, tarping should be done by 2 persons in wet conditions or adverse weather. So during this fatality, there was a little bit of it was a little colder, and there was a little bit of ice and stuff on the load when they did the investigation. So what they said was icy or wet tarps can be extremely slippery, making tarping very hazardous. In wet or adverse conditions, when the tarps are wet, it is recommended that tarping should be done by 2 workers. Each worker should position and secure the tarp while standing on the ground at opposite sides of the truck, avoiding the need to stand on wet or slippery tarps. No one should ever stand or walk on a wet tarp. So that's their first recommendation. In wet conditions, you need to take more precautions. Their second recommendation is employers should conduct a job hazard analysis of all work activities with the participation of the workers. So this goes for all safety stuff. We got to know how to do the job, and then we have to know what hazards are involved, and then we have to look at how do we control the hazards. And this can be done for our trucking procedures as well. You know, step 1, Well, what are the hazards? Step 2, what are the hazards? So just kind of like an example of that. A job hazard analysis should examine all work areas for fall, electrical, chemical, or other hazards that a worker may encounter. After identifying the hazards, the employee should be instructed on how to correct or avoid the hazards. So that's their second recommendation. Third recommendation, employers should provide a safe means of access to the trailers. So it was noted during the investigation that employees had to climb onto trailers without a ladder. They recommend that a safe means of access be provided to trailers such as ladders, portable work platforms, or tarping stations. So you look at, this is a nice ladder from our people with the fruit, with a nice wide base. I like these ladders. Then also the second picture, we have different movable platforms that you can use. And thirdly, of different tarping stations. This is a newly made tarping station, very engineered very well. It's got a cover to help if it's raining, so reduce the amount of wet conditions on the loads. And then it has a beam across the top with a self-retracting lanyard, so you can hook up a harness to it, so you can climb up on your load if you have to. And at least if you do fall, the injury shouldn't be as severe. All right. 4, employers and employees should ensure that tarps are stored in an area protected from the weather. The tarps were stored on the back of the trailers, exposing them to rain and snow. Storage of the tarps in a protected area would increase the possibility of the tarps becoming wet or iced. Wet tarps should be dried before storage. So what they're saying here is that when this guy fell off to his demise, the tarps were just kind of thrown in the back of the truck, and when they put on, they were probably wet and icy and all that. So what they're saying here is that you should, keep control of your tarps, keep them dry, so that when you do unroll them, they're not as wet and as icy as they would be if you just had them open, like secured to the back of the empty flatbed. So when you're looking at your tarping, that's one good way. If you're rolling out a dry tarp, it's not going to be as slippery as a wet tarp. So that's what they're saying here. That might be a solution. So let's move into some of the citations. I was on the phone yesterday with L&I. I like to call them guys and get information directly from the horse's mouth so I can help you guys. So I was finding out, well, what do they cite us for? Okay, if L&I or OSHA is at your sawmill and they're watching you load, what can they cite you for if you're not doing it correctly? Well, once again, I got kind of a stiff arm as usual, but looking at actual citations, I was told that there's 2 ways that this could be cited. Number 1 way would be if you're up 4 feet, you must use fall protection. Now, if the exception to that would be if your load, we have some members that take lumber to a construction site. That could be classified as construction. So you're moving construction materials for construction. Well, if you can prove that that's construction, then you fall under a different criteria for fall protection, which is 6 feet or 10 feet. Kind of depends on the state and if you have state program, federal program. So they could cite you, 10 feet construction, 6 feet construction, or if it's going from, say, a sawmill to a reseller, then it would be rolling stock. So then you'd be under more general industry rules, in which is 4 feet. So you kind of got to look at, well, what is this product used for? If you're taking it, say, like you're a hardware lumber yard and you're taking that lumber to a construction site to build a house, you could be classified under construction, and then you have a little bit more leeway as far as the height restrictions for citations. So best practice, 4 feet. Everybody use 4 feet. But if you're more on the other side of construction, you can prove it's construction, you have a little bit more distance you can use for citation wise. So that's where they'd cite you is, not having the right fall protection if you're up on top of your load and you're above 4 feet from the ground. Some of the other citations, you know, like we talked about a little bit, if you don't have the two binders over each of the pieces. If you just have one and they're over 5 feet, you can be, you can get cited for that because it's not secured properly. Now let's dig into liability and risk. I'll give you a disclaimer. I'm not a lawyer, but I'm trying to play one today, I guess, to kind of help sort some of this stuff out. If you have any questions on this stuff, please call our in-house counsel on the legal stuff, but we'll kind of get through this so we kind of have a good rules of thumb, at least some knowledge about where the liability and risk goes with the trucking. So we're dealing specifically with independent contractors. They're truckers or trucking companies. We contract with them to come to our site, pick up our lumber, and deliver it to our buyers. That's one thing. Or if we have our own trucks and we own our own trucks, and we provide it, then that's another thing. So we'll kind of talk about both of those. Now, for workers' compensation, when somebody falls from a truck, gets hurt, that is on the trucking company for workers' comp. So if they're independent, it goes on their independent trucking company against them as far as the workers' compensation claim. It doesn't go against the sawmill. Now, if it's a sawmill's truck driver, it's their own trucks and they get hurt, well, then yeah, it'd be on the sawmill. But when you're looking at this, workers' compensation claim goes against the trucking company. Now, the other side of the coin is tort law, civil law. So you look at, okay, the trucker could try to sue the site. So like if it's independent contracted trucker, they come to your site, they fall off their truck, they get hurt, they could try to sue the sawmill. Well, how do we handle this? How do we reduce that risk? Well, here they are. Provide a tarping station. Provide some safe means for the independent contracted truckers to use to tarp their loads safely. And then to follow that up, we need safety policy, we need signage that tells them you need to use fall protection when you tarp your load. You go up 4 feet, you need to have fall protection. And a lot of this can be laid out in the contract agreement that we have set forth with the specific trucking company. So the contract agreement with the trucking company, basically, it's a written work order that spells out what the trucker's responsibilities are. Well, number one, we hired them to deliver the load. We understand that, so that should be in there. And then also talking about procedures. Now, we don't want to tell them how to do their job because then we become the employer and then we have more obligations as far as their safety, and we can own a lot more of that responsibility. But in the contract itself, we can put the safety procedures, policies right in there. You need, when you're securing your loads and you go above 4 feet, you need to use fall protection, which could mean using our, say if we have a tarping station, using that tarping station. Or using, other means, ladders, there's all kinds of different things. I'll show you some of those in a minute. But one of the other things too, supplying their own harnesses. By us providing harnesses for all these different truckers to use, it opens up a little more liability on our side. What if the harness doesn't fit them? What if the harness isn't maintained? But I mean, that should be in our policies, but things sometimes get forgot about. Well, what if that harness breaks and there's someone else is using our harness? It opens us wide open to litigation. So, I mean, you could put that right in your contract agreement with the trucking company that they will supply their own harnesses, and they know that ahead of time. So when they come to your site, they bring their harness. I know if I was loading a truck and I had to use harnesses, I'd want my own harness so I knew how safe that was. I wouldn't want to put my life in someone else's hands if I could simply get my own harness and use it at multiple sites throughout my trucking operations. And then of course, delivery of our products. So these are some ideas that could be put in place to help reduce the risk of one of these truckers getting hurt on our site and suing us. Now, here's a good example, tarping station. Okay, here's an awesome tarping station. One of our members was so gracious to let me use these pictures. So you have a lot of good things going on here. You have lighting, you see lights, you have a cover, so if it's raining or snowing, it'll minimize getting more rain and snow onto the loads and onto the tarps, which makes them more slippery. And then there is a beam across the top that there's a runner that runs along on wheels kind of, and it has a self-retracting lanyard, which you hook to fall protection. So when you're up on top of your load, it will help you from not getting injured as severely as if you don't have any fall protection. And then you have some wind protection. They put up the bricking so you don't have so much wind, and so you can secure your load without, with fall protection. And so this is one example. This is a tarping station. There's another picture of it. It's kind of a side view. So you got a nice roof, you got lighting, you have a place to hook to your lanyard, your self-retracting lanyard to, and your harness. So that's all set up there. And see the sign there? It says fall restraint, mandatory when tarping trucks. So what does that do? That gives us a layer of protection. So they try to sue us. They say, hey, you got this big yellow sign. If they were, you catch them. I mean, you got to set up those policies and you have those rules, and people know ahead of time. If you inform these trucks ahead of time before they get to your site, there's not like, well, I didn't know. Well, yeah, you did. It was in your contract. However you negotiate these trucking. But you have the big sign. You have you provide this. So if they're tarping a load and they fall off their truck and they're not using this stuff, it's their fault. You can kind of prove that in court. That, hey, you provided all this stuff for them. They chose not to use it. The liability is on them, not on the business or the site. Here's another one. Here's a newer one here. Just, you put that all together. If you guys want more information on building any of these things, please let me know. I can pass you some information on maybe design or plans or stuff like that, cost and all that. So what does a tarping station do? It creates fall protection for securing loads. You have self-retracting lanyards, harnesses. So if you do fall, it'll catch you so you don't fall on your head. Reduces the severity of the injury. And one thing though about these things, it's like anything else, it has to be maintained. The station needs to be maintained, and it has to have a maintenance plan. It has to be followed. You don't just set it up and leave a lanyard and a harness laying around out there in the sun and the weather and the elements, and then someone go and use it and it breaks. So then you will own that liability. So lanyards, they always need to be visually inspected before each use. You could even put a sign up that says that, so to remind our truck drivers, hey, inspect this. Put that liability on them. Harnesses, and the lanyards, all that kind of stuff needs to be kept in good working condition. Now some more legal stuff. A contracted or independent trucker, they're defined as legally as invitees. That's a word that defines them in the legal books. Now, we invite them onto our site to do work. Now, this requires certain obligations from us as the business. Number one, we need to identify hazards that these invitees may be exposed to, and then we need to control the hazards. So, for example, we've identified a fall hazard. How do we control that? Well, we require fall protection. And then we even provide them with the tarping stations or ladders or whatever you guys want to use. But I'm saying we have a plan. We have a procedure. We tell them what they need to do their job safely when they're on our site, and they're under this definition of an invitee. So that's a legal term. So anyways, we just need to, control the hazards even for them coming on our site, and that's what we do. And that pushes the liability more on them than on us. So if someone does get hurt, the check we write isn't as huge. So here's an example of another tarping station. Just kind of looked on, did some research on a few different other ideas out there. This one is a drive-through tarping station, eliminates the need for a driver to climb around at all. This provides safe access platform and a position above the trailer. I mean, I like that, that you are providing the fall protection with the tarping station, with the lanyard and all that stuff, but number one, you got to put them in a lanyard. You got to put them in a harness. You got to hook them to a lanyard. And if they fall, they're still going to get hurt. They might not die, but you know, if you ever, I've investigated quite a few fall accidents. Nobody's in very good shape when they fall. Those harnesses yank up. Anyways, we kind of go from there. But you know, the fall protection is the last resort, in my opinion. Just like it's PPE. PPE is always the last resort. Earplugs, same thing. We don't want, you know, people put everybody earplugs. Well, why not quiet the equipment down? Let's engineer it out. And that's what something like this does. It engineers out the problem. It does it for you. So from this location, the trucker is able to access a rope or a hook. And they have different ways, you know, to hook up your tarp, and then you drive under it, and it pulls the tarp over the top of the truck. And then from the ground, you can grab the eye holes and hook on all of your bungees and all that kind of stuff. So you don't have any need to ever climb around. It unrolls it for you. You put it up there. And then what they do is they have a secondary, which is something like this. It's a secondary portable platform. So like if something gets stuck or something gets caught, you're not going to get the excuse, well, I had to climb up there because it got stuck. Well, no, you can use this secondary means of access to unstick something that gets stuck, right? Now here's some other means, you know, looking around for different research there. One of them is a forklift one, where you fasten the tarp on this forklift arm, then you lift it up and you drape it over your load. And then you secure it all from done on the ground. There's videos on YouTube about this if you guys are curious. It looks like a real simple thing to make. You know, you might need the engineering stamp on it, you know, but just kind of looking at it, you can buy these. You might be able to make them, just make sure that they're engineered correctly. But you can extend over, drape the tarp over the load. You're not exposing anybody. You're engineering out the person's exposure to climb. Climbing around is very dangerous. Here's another one with another overhead deal, and it's automatic though. So I mean, some of the places that have the tarping stage, you might be able to install this. It looks like it's a crane operated deal, kind of with the push button controller that you can move the actual hoist system, and it drapes the tarp right over the load, so you don't have to climb anywhere. So that's what we always want to look at: engineer it out. Can we eliminate the hazard? How can someone get hurt from here? You can't. I mean, there's just, unless the tarp falls on you, I guess, but you're not climbing. There's no fall hazard at all. So as we look at some of this stuff, we have to, you know, look at some of the controls. I mean, that's what we do in safety, right? Find a hazard, control a hazard. That's what we do. So here's some helpful hints. Well, just to sum up the rest of our presentation today. Okay, all personnel on foot must be clear of the loading zone during all mechanized loading or unloading operations. That's where people die, is when people get crushed or pinched between two vehicles. So material and equipment can shift or break free during any location transfer. Workers on foot should never be on the opposite side of a truck from a forklift while it's loading or unloading, because you can't be seen over there. Stuff can fall over and crush you. Do not allow workers on foot in trailers while forklift is involved in loading or unloading operations. There's just too much can go wrong. Those loads are heavy and they'll crush you. Provide drivers a place to wait, so they're away from this, so they're not in the way. And if they're helping and they're guiding, that's fine. But as a forklift driver, always maintain contact with that driver. Identify hazards before loading or unloading. All personnel involved with a loading or unloading operation should assess the potential hazards before the operation begins. A clear understanding of the procedures and communication between the workers must be established, like the loading and the truck drivers, to understand what needs to be done. Site and freight specific knowledge is very important. Avoid overhead power lines and steep grades. Visiting drivers should be made aware of their responsibilities. Can you give them a checklist when they get out of their truck? You know, as they come through the shipping area, do you have a little checklist? You could remind them of things that we do here at our site. We do this for safety. Here's your checklist. Put up signs, all that kind of stuff. Document and enforce standard operating procedures. Proper loading and unloading procedures should be established and then followed. All workers in loading zones should be trained on these procedures and given refresher trainings periodically. observe them as safety people, observe our workers. Are they following what they need to follow? Do they look like they need help? Is the procedure we wrote doing what it says and, saying what it does? I mean, what we have going on, is it really what's going on? And is there a way we can amend our policy to make it safer? Sometimes we draw it up and we let it go. Well, we need to constantly be editing our safety procedures so that they are very practical. Corrections and enforcement of company procedures should be carried out for any, deviations in the procedure. Discipline, right? Priority, properly secured loads on trucks, forklifts, and cranes. All loads must be secured to the truck, container, or trailer to prevent shifting material during transport. Equipment such as load bars, vertical supports, and load straps should be used to assert that the load arrives in the same orientation than when it departs. So we want those loads to be one unit. That's our goal. All the bundles get hooked together. All the bundles get hooked to the other bundles, and then all the bundles get hooked to the trailer, so that the trailer with all of its lumber on it becomes one unit. During transfer of any load, personnel stay clear of the path of travel. When moving multiple items or loads that may shift, properly secure them with straps, bands, or other means. And when raising or moving loads with a boom or a crane, ensure that the path of travel is clear of hazards. So you always want to survey your area before you move stuff, because it's usually too late if something pops up in your way. Now you want to implement safer sheeting and tarping equipment or procedures, and that's kind of what we got done talking about. Securing loads with tarps and sheeting presents frequent hazards. So we kind of talked about that. Implement procedures or mechanical tarping, sheeting systems to ensure workers are not exposed to these fall hazards. Institute procedures to assure people of clear trucks and trailers before moving. Companies should have procedures in place to make sure that truck and trailer or containers being moved is empty of all personnel and all workers on foot are clear. Keeping your loading areas, clear, managing that area, and training your people so they know what's going on, so they stay clear. Like have walkways, or, we talked about a lot of, using chalk, like baseball field chalk or whatever, just, or painting our walkways so people, trucks, and forklifts stay away from each other. Have walkways set up for our workers to get from the mill to the break room to the parking lot and all of that. A visual sign indicating workers are in a trailer should be visible from the truck mirrors anytime personnel are working in or on a trailer on a loading dock. That's just good communicating, so the truck doesn't move if it's being worked on. That's where a lot of these injuries and accidents and deaths occur, is bad communication. So that's what this is an example of, letting truckers know what loading's going on. And the keys, that's kind of a lockout thing, right? With the truck keys, you take the keys out of the ignition, you turn it off, it can't be moved, right? Protect all drop-offs, gaps, pinch points on loading docks and lift gates. That's without saying. Look that stuff over. Where can we get injuries at? Make sure everyone's trained properly on our forklifts and our operators. Never be downhill of a moving load. Use wheel chocks and other visible restraint devices. Wheel chocks are really nice for stopping things from moving, but they also provide another safety added benefit, and that is causing people to walk around their vehicle. Raises their awareness. Oh, I have to unchock my tires. Well, that forces them to get out, walk around their vehicle, and that will help them identify maybe any other hazards that have changed since they first parked. So it does kind of two things for you. This one, I see more and more out there, and I feel that this is a really good benefit, is wearing high visibility. Now, the science behind high visibility is very concrete. Our eyes see things quicker with the greater visibility. The sooner you see something, the sooner you can react to it, the sooner you can make good decisions and stop an accident from happening. So anything that can improve visibility increases the amount of time that we have to make a decision to avoid some type of accident. So everybody on the site should be covered in high visibility. You know, people say, well, we get blinded. Not really. This research has shown that the high visibility kind of resets itself. So people wearing vests, you know, our truckers should know that. When we set up these contracts with them, when we do training, I've seen people have these little safety checklist tear-off sheets, or kind of like sticky notes they hand the driver when they come in. So they're aware of exactly what's required on our site. We require high visibility, we require hard hats, we require boots, we require, you know, whatever your requirements are, but make sure that's communicated to these independent contractors. And also, if it's their first time, you know, showing them, like, you know, your tarping station, showing them, you know, the procedures you do at your site. That little bit of communication can save a lot of problems, especially with a new driver that's never been to your site. Employees should always use 3 points of contact when working on services. Avoid working at heights when possible. Do not assume a good strong tug will open everything, because that 3 points of contact keeps you grounded so you don't fall. Don't jump out of your trucks. You know, use 3 points of contact, use the stairs, use the ladders, you know, whatever's there, but don't jump down. That causes lots of injuries. You look through a lot of injuries for most companies, a lot of them are caused by people jumping out of equipment. Well, that concludes our webinar today on securing and tarping of loads. There's a few questions that maybe come up. Please send me an email. My email is jzeman@tpmrs.com. If you have any questions securing loads, or if you want this presentation, we'll post that too, or if you want me to, I can gladly send that to you. If you have any other questions regarding this topic or any other safety topics, please give Chris or I a call, and we'll gladly help you with all your safety needs here at TPM. And with that, I bid you have a safe and wonderful future. Thank you.